Well, hello there. My name's Kevin, and I want to make a video on a Uniformation Gk2 and a Uniformation Gk3 Ultra. Now, I got the Gk2 back in about April, and since then it's been amazing. I've been using it pretty much every single day, printing as many models as I can throw at it with 100% success rate. But that did take one calibration at the beginning. The reason I did that calibration was one of the prints was kind of falling off the build plate, so I re-leveled the Gk2, and since then it's been flawless. The only other issue I had was some lines in the print. It was really odd. It would print maybe like 1 inch or 2 inches of material, but then you'd get a gap of about 1 mil that was all filled with like a choppy line. I couldn't work it out myself, so I reached out to Uniformation, and they did reply to me and gave me some suggestions, but none of them really worked. When I took the FEP sheet out, on that time, I looked on the bottom and noticed one of the clips that held it in place, that the clip had cracked, but it had cracked where the screw had attached it to it. So just that tiny little crack was making it lift ever so slightly when it was pulling away, which was causing the lines. Now, once I replaced that clip with the included ones that came in the package, no problem whatsoever at all. But I guess that's part of owning a 3D printer. You don't know how to use it instinctively, like breathing or blinking. You just do it. Whereas with a 3D printer, you need to spend time to learn that this does this and that does that and this can equal this, and you teach yourself in time how to fix things yourself. If you're someone that likes buying something, plugging it in and it just works, well, that can happen, but if there's a problem, you need to know how to fix something and you need to learn how to fix it. So it's kind of like owning an engine without a mechanic. You are the mechanic, you have to fix it. So if you're not happy with repairing your own items, then maybe 3D printing isn't for you. But that doesn't just apply to the Gk2, that's all other brands of 3D printer also, because everything needs its own maintenance, and that's something that you have to work on yourself and improve at. Otherwise, you're just going to be in a bad place for the entire time. Now, going back to the clips, the Gk2 has 4 clips which are screwed in place and they're on the resin vat. So as you put it down, you slide it back in position, which did cause problems with a few people that were inserting it wrong and causing some scratches and stuff like that. I never had that problem because I read the instructions, so I know how to use it. The Gk3, however, doesn't use them clips. It just pushes in place, and there's 2 slide clips at the side that hold it, which actually makes it more firm. The Gk2, when it's in place, does have a tiny bit of wiggle room, but it still holds firm in place, so not really a problem. If the clips are okay, your prints are going to be okay. If the clips are broken or damaged, you're going to have troubles and it's going to look ugly. Now, don't be put off by what I'm saying about the clips. That sounds like there's something wrong with them. It's not. It's just one clip broke and it just cracks slightly. It's just one of those maintenance things where you do need to check it. Apart from those things I've mentioned, everything else has been flawless with the Gk2, and I think it's one of the best printers on the market, and to be honest, I nearly bought another 2 of them instead of the Gk3 Ultra. Now, with the printer, at the same time we bought the wash and cure station. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those. The wash station is an ultrasonic cleaner, which just is an ultrasonic cleaner at the end of the day, but at a reasonable price. You might be able to get it cheaper if you bought it online now, because obviously times have changed from when we bought it, but it works. What I do is I fill it with distilled water, have a tub inside the cage, and in that I put isopropyl alcohol. And the reason I do that is because there's a lot of people saying it explodes and things like that. Isopropyl obviously is alcohol, and when you're using 99% alcohol and it's vibrating at a high rate in the summer, it's not something you're going to want to explode in your face or in your garage or wherever you've kept it. So I decided to put it in the tub, make it a bit safer. So I get my prints, I clean them in one pot, I put them in another pot, and then when they're in their final stage, I will place them in the ultrasonic to give them that deep clean that really leaves it immaculate. And then for the final step, I use an air duster, one of those ones you use for PCs. It's an electric one that you plug in. Now, I wouldn't say use a hairdryer because that adds heat, and I wouldn't say heat's a good idea to put on alcohol, so this just blows out cold air, and it dries them really quickly, and it saves me having to wait around for them to air dry themselves. And then finally, you place it in the cure station, and then you set it for the amount of time for the size of the thing. So I print quite a few bits, so I tend to go up to 10 minutes of curing at a time. Some people might think that's overkill, but I do find that does help a lot. And that brings me to the curing station. It's just a box and it has UV lights in it. A little switch on the front, you can set the timer to how long you want it to cure for, and then there's a little switch in the lid that knows when you open it so you don't get blinded by UV lights, which, makes it a bit safer. You place the resin prints on the turntable and then you press start on the timer and you just wait, and when it's finished you take them out. fantastic. The only issue I had, so the turntable inside is kind of like a microwave. You know, you have the disc that's inside a microwave, the tray that you put your stuff on and it spins round and it's got the wheels. Well, if you look at those, they have 4 wheels. The curing station from Uniformation has 3 wheels, so one at north, east and west, but none at south, which means as it spins, it's got its own weight. So as you load the plate up, now I never overload it. If I fill it up, it's very tiny objects anyway, so it's nothing that's going to be too heavy for it. And if it is something heavy, I tend to place that in the middle. As it spins round, the bottom part doesn't have a wheel, so it will dip on that part. The problem with that is, over time and usage of what I've been using it for, the edge has started to grind away. And if you look at the edge, it's actually turned to kind of a powder. And that's not resin powder. That's actually plastic on metal where it's rubbing. I've reached out to them and they are looking into it at the moment, and it's under warranty, so they will help me, which is fantastic. But it's just something that if it was me designing it, I probably would have put a 4th wheel there just so it had enough balance all the way around instead of just 3 points. Now that's enough about the Gk2. Let's talk about the Gk3 Ultra, which is probably why you're here on this video. So the Gk3 Ultra, I did order right at the beginning when there was a pre-order bonus and you got some free items with it. At the beginning you got 2 bottles of resin and later on you got 1 bottle of resin and so on. Now their original set time for delivery had to be pushed back, but sometimes that happens in production. Obviously you can't control everything and times have to be pushed back and, you know, consumer have to wait. So everyone was happy with that, but they did go back a little bit far, so people were getting a bit worried about their money and their purchases and things like that and thinking about buying other products. But they said sorry and they basically opened up to everyone and said, hey, we're going to give you some freebies, and these freebies are to, you know, make up for the time. So you get some FEP sheets, lychee slicer for a year and other things like that, a bit of resin, you know, which is all well and good, but nobody had them yet. And the reason we don't have them is because they're so out of stock from everything that's been ordered, they've had to actually push that back. So all the bits that were promised for being late are now late themselves because we have to wait for those, which is a bit of a bummer. The good thing here is they're very open. This is the thing with Uniformation, is they don't hide anything behind any sort of curtain. They tell you up front, oh, this is a problem, this is how we're going to fix it, versus, you know, some of the big companies that release something and there's smoke and mirrors and try and trick you into think that you're actually getting a good deal and the waiting's, you know, part of your problem, not theirs. Whereas Uniformation is saying, well, this is on us, this is how we're going to fix it. And that's fantastic. And you don't get that with many companies. And now we fast forward onto the day of delivery. Now, it actually got sped up and it arrived earlier than I thought. It was really heavy. The package weighed an absolute ton, but the box was fine. Now, I'd already seen on the Facebook page, there's a group on there where everyone can talk about their problems and stuff that they've printed and the good and the bad and stuff like that, and they're very, very open. Now, with the original batch that went out, a lot of people had problems with the lid. The lid at the front was cracking on the hinges, so what they did was they reinforced the hinges. The problem being is, now they're reinforced, the cracks have actually moved up and gone to the next weakest spot. Now, the thing I found is, when there was pictures on the group, I did see that they were stacking them on pallets. Now, these are very, very heavy boxes, and if you stack the box on top of it, it doesn't matter how much padding you've got, and those boxes were really padded, the pressure on top was hitting the metal and the perspex. The perspex was hitting on the middle, which would bow, and the 2 weak points would crack, and that's what I think is the problem with the lids. Now, I may be totally wrong there, but that's my opinion on it. There's something that you could do, and it's just not stack it, which isn't ideal when you need to send out loads of printers if you've got to send them out on pallets without stacking them, because that takes time, more pallets, more effort and more money, but it is something that's needed. And they did say they were going to work on it, and they also contacted me and said that they would replace the lid free of charge, of course. Fantastic yet again. So when you're opening a new product, seeing damage like that isn't ideal. You know, you want to buy a new car, you don't expect the door to be dented and things like that. You don't want a new Xbox, but the controller's cracked. It's not something you're going to want. So it's not a good first impression from the company, but at the same time, they're willing to work on that. And they know it's an issue and they've been open about it. Before mine even was delivered, I was expecting it to be cracked, which made it actually a little less of a blow for when it did arrive. And when I opened it and noticed the cracks, it wasn't as bad. A bit disappointing, but they're going to fix it. Anyway, we move on to the printing. So I set the printer up nice and easy, and I calibrated it straight away because the leveling on the Gk2, even though it said it was pre-leveled from factory, and as Gk say, they do pre-level them, even the Gk3, but I did it myself. Now, I checked it, leveled it, and it seemed level and it was great. So I pressed print, I did my print and I noticed one thing. It failed. And I was like, that's weird. And I was using my Gk2 settings. And I know those settings were perfect with that resin. And I was like, that's odd. So then I used the resin that, the Uniformation came with. The problem being is that resin was even worse, and that failed 100% of the time. I didn't get one single good print out of that resin. Now, obviously I contacted customer support and they gave me some new settings. With those new settings, I did have some success, but I still hadn't had one single good print with the Uniformation resin. Now, they shipped it with some HD grey. It looked fantastic for the parts that did kind of print, but it was odd because it could print an entire plate of a model. The head might be fine, but the leg was totally destroyed. Things like that, so I couldn't get a consistent print. So that made me think maybe the plate was warped. So anyway, cleaned it all up, checked the plate. It seemed quite flat, but when I lowered it down to the 0 position, I could see that it wasn't level with the LCD screen. So instead of sitting like, you imagine your TV screen is X amount of size, and then there was a metal plate over it. That's kind of how it works. The UV comes out of the screen and touches the metal plate and cures it to it. The problem being was it was kind of like 5mm to the right and 5mm down. So it wasn't exactly in position. So when I had a curing test, it didn't actually work because it was hanging off the build plate, which made it a bit weird and a bit awkward. So obviously I had to contact customer support again, which are fantastic. And they said they promised to get me a new plate out. The problem with that is obviously if you're someone who doesn't want to wait, you just have to wait. This isn't something you can go, oh, I'll get it from Amazon and next day delivery. This is, we'll order you a plate. When it ships, you'll get it in 3 weeks. If that doesn't fix it, we'll order something else. In 3 weeks, you'll get that part, which makes it very frustrating if you just want to get on and use a new item that you've just purchased. This isn't something like a games console. Can you imagine it? It's Christmas Day and then your Xbox is there and you open it and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And you're like, well, the controller doesn't work. Well, we'll order you a new one from Amazon and it'll be here tomorrow. It's like, well, we'll order you a new controller, but you won't get a controller for 3 weeks. And then you wait 3 weeks and they go, actually, it was the cable. Wait another 3 weeks. That's something that is quite frustrating as a consumer. If you're using this printer and it's just for a hobby, it's not as stressful. But if this was for work and you were actually printing and making money on it, like some people do, you'd want to use it now. You've paid for it. You want to use it as quick as possible to start earning money. If you're waiting extra, 2 or 3 months for parts to keep coming in until it works perfectly, that does put a spanner in the works. Now again, the customer support has been absolutely fantastic. They're sorting those things out and they are on the way. During that time, I did get some other settings, which I tried with my Sunlu ABS resin. Now, I started using that resin, and I do find that it's more reliable than, say, standard resin. I don't know why. The ABS stuff just seems a bit more forgiving. And of course, when you've got little bits like hair and, like a tail on a character, they do have some bend to them. So if you do bend them, they don't just crack and smash like standard resin. So I do prefer that. With that, I did print a model and I had my first success and the print was fantastic. The quality was exactly the same, in my opinion, as the Gk2, and the Gk2 print's absolutely fantastic as well. So having that, but on a larger scale, makes things so much easier. So that is definitely a pro. The other thing that was kind of annoying though was during the time of waiting for delivery, they announced the Gk3 Pro. Now, obviously that's kind of a worrying time. People were like, well, Ultra is higher than Pro, but Pro during a time when the Ultra should come out seems like, am I supposed to wait? Is this the same size? Is this bigger, smaller, what? And we didn't know. Now turns out that it's smaller, but it has a few extra features that this one doesn't have. So it kind of feels like if this printer had the camera, for instance, that would be fantastic because it's good to watch your prints. It's good to make time lapses. They're good for quality videos. It's also good to check on your prints. I mean, I have a Ring doorbell set up on a chair in front of my printer so that I can click on it every now and again and just see how the print's going. I know it's a bit jank to do it that way, but it works and it helps me know if something's failed, which is how I found out everything else had failed, because once it's dipping in the resin and printing, you can't see under the resin. So once it starts lifting out and you notice bits are falling off, you might as well stop the print because you're already wasting resin as it is. Stop it, take it off, clean it, try again. And that's why I had so many fails with the old resin. Now, during conversations with customer service, I did say to them, if the problems can't be fixed, I feel like I should just send this back and maybe get 2 more Gk2s and have a setup of 3 of them. That way I could run 3 at once, printing different parts of a model and basically get an entire model printed in the same time it would take the Gk3 to print an entire model on its own. The difference is if you're using 3 printers doing the same thing, you've got 3 lots of wear and tear. You've got more clips for 3 printers, you've got more FEP sheets for 3 printers, you've got more cleaning for 3 printers. This all adds up versus one big printer, 1 cleaning job, 1 FEP sheet, and so on. So having the bigger printer does save time, but having 3 that are reliable did seem like a better option than waiting for this to be fixed, if it can be fixed properly. Now I know the Gk3 doesn't have a camera, but it does have a resin drip feed. Now you get these cartridges and it does come with one that's empty and you can fill it up with the resin of your choice, which is quite good. It just slots in place. Now you calibrate it when you first use it. You have to leave the cartridge out, calibrate it, put it in. Now what I found is you have to feed that resin out, do the cleaning button, and it will actually push out all the air and start sucking the resin through. And once you see it start dripping into the tray, it's ready to print. So when you print, it'll automatically feed. If you haven't done that, it doesn't feed it and it just doesn't do anything. But when it did it, it seemed to work well and it did keep topping it up. The only negative I have on that is 2 things. So when you have resin, you shake the bottle up, then you pour it into the tray and you print. The problem being is, when you've got the cartridge, it's inserted. You don't shake the cartridge and then print, it's just sitting there. So if it's sitting there and needs shaking, it doesn't self-stir, which means it's just feeding in resin that is unshaken. But at the same time, it hasn't been warmed. So when you put the resin in the vat, it warms it up. But being in the cartridge, it isn't warmed up. So I don't know whether the system itself is slightly warming it, but I have no way of testing that. So I'm going to say maybe it warms itself up. I can't guarantee it though. So it's time to wrap things up. With the Gk2, I had nothing but success. With the Gk3 Ultra, I've had nothing but failures and just 1 good print. The problem being is it does put me off printing with it at the moment until all the parts turn up, because I want it to work perfectly all the time instead of hoping that it works versus just pressing print on the Gk2 and it works every time flawlessly. And that's obviously a big worry. Now, as before, customer service is great, and I keep saying that. But the good thing is, when you talk to customer service, it doesn't seem as aggressive. So when you're talking to them, it feels like you're talking to family versus talking to a company that doesn't care. If you've ever been on hold to a company and it just seems like they don't want to be on the phone and they don't want to help you, well, these guys want to help you. They want to solve these problems. They don't want there to be any problems, so they're happy to help. And that's what makes it easier to swallow, is because they're so happy to help and so friendly and so nice, it doesn't seem as aggressive. So you don't get upset over it. You just go, okay, I'll wait. And they even said to me, if you wait, these parts turn up and we still have problems and you're not happy, you can return it and it's on us. And that's fantastic. So I have to give them props for that. As a launch overall though, it does feel rushed and they do seem to be paying the price for it. And we're having to wait, of course. And when you're spending over £1,000 on a printer, that's not ideal. So it's not something everybody wants, but they're willing to fix it and they're willing to sort it as soon as they can, and they're doing everything. And they are a small company. That's the thing. They're not a multi-billion company. These are a very small company making these products, and they are fantastic. As I said, Gk2, 10 out of 10, no problems whatsoever. So far, I can't give this a proper review, my opinion on this printer, because I haven't really used it to its full potential, and I can't at the moment because I don't have it in a fully working state. But I'm just mentioning the issues I've had so far and that they're willing to fix them, and I do think that's a good thing, and more companies can learn from Uniformation. But anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. I know it's a bit long, but I'm hoping it gives you some insight into what to do for your next 3D printer. But all I can say is the Gk2 is incredible and you can't go wrong for the price. So if you're looking for a printer and you don't want to wait, go for that one right now.